gentlemen, please give us a warm welcome for an absolutely interesting and special guest for us today, Hani Almadhoun, Director of Philanthropy over at UNRWA. UNRWA is a USA national community to help Palestine refugees. Is that correct, Hani?
Correct, yeah, to lift up the voices of the Palestine refugees.
Hani, before we get started, I just want to say thanks again for coming on, truly being open to this. We truly appreciate you. Without further ado, would you mind go ahead and just sharing us who you are and what do you currently do?
Sure, yeah, great. Thank you, Jackson, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Hani Almadhoun. I work as the Director of Philanthropy at UNRWA USA, that's UNRWA USA. It's the only UN agency that works for Palestine refugees, and it's been around for 75 years almost. And we work in 5 countries, Lebanon, Syria, 5 field offices, I must say, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Gaza, and the West Bank, including Jerusalem. We provide basic services for the Palestine refugees in health, education, and it's been a joy to be part of the UN UNRWA USA, which is an affiliate of the UN agency. We're separate, but we're connected.
Fantastic. Hani, before we just dive into the quick questions here, just to pick your brain, get to know you a little bit better on a personal level, where did you grow up and what got you into doing what you do? Because there's a lot of individuals out there that have specific routes. One of them, either something happened in life where they just have to want to give back, so to say, but I just want to hear from your end, like, why did you do what you do?
Great. So I grew up, I was born actually in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and I grew up in Gaza. That's the occupied Palestinian territories. And then that's where you get to see the suffering, you get to see the refugee camps. And, my family we moved out from the refugee camp. Most of my cousins and the people I rolled with there lived in the refugee camp. So you see it, you file it. And then in 2000, I got a scholarship to come to the US. At Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. That's where I got my education. And, part of the education, as you know, Jackson, you go to do an internship. And since I studied international studies with a minor in Latin American studies and Spanish, so it's always, like, hey, I want to learn about the world. I got an internship. The internship turned into a job. I worked for a year. Then I went back, got more education. I got a master's in public administration. After that, I came back to my old job, which wasn't really related to anything I was doing. I was doing international studies, but I was hired to be a bookkeeper. So I did that for
Really?
and that was great. It's an opportunity. So you did from doing the books to doing membership, then donations, and then with donations, you start like, there is opportunities for me actually not only to process these donations, to actually solicit donations or sponsorships, as in the case of my third job. And you train and you figure out you could really make a living doing this because you also do good. It's not like you're just creating widgets or making somebody else richer. You're doing some good work that helps people, puts food at the table, and that's because a lot of philanthropists and generous people make it possible for you.
Nice. Okay, so what we're hearing is you actually started out in accounting, and throughout that time kind of working on the books, you were introduced to philanthropy, like kind of giving back, and you kind of basically got this aha moment and you combine it together, and then this is where it led to you.
Yeah, and my third job was in civil rights, and then you move into like, hey, and then you start working for, like the first one was the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, great crew. Then I went to the Jerusalem Fund. That's a sort of foundation, a place that promotes Palestinian culture, art, through lectures, education. And then, but really professionally, where I started taking fundraising professionally is at a job of mine called ANERA, that's American Near East Refugee Aid, where you start really just seeing that like as a profession, not just like a hobby or something that you're good at. And then, you start learning, becoming a member of organizations, associations like the AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals. And then, you start upping your game because And up to this day, you have to be intellectually curious. The fundraising landscape is changing, obviously, Jackson, with the pandemic. We started doing more online activities, virtual. And then if you're really not ahead of the curve or you don't adapt quickly, I'm reading statistics about maybe like 10% or 15% of NGOs folded because of the pandemic. They couldn't really survive or raise money. So luckily, we were able to pivot into doing different things during the pandemic, and now we're seeing it come back to in-person a little bit. And we just did our first in-person Gaza 5K in New York, in Brooklyn, and that was a smashing success. And I could tell the people who came, they wanted to run, they wanted to be social, they wanted to dance a little bit, and I thought that was great.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And just to confirm, you're in the East Coast, right? I remember when we first reached out,
Yeah,
you're in the
most of
District of Columbia, Washington.
frankly, most of my jobs have been in Washington D.C. and you
Yeah.
know, like a lot of people here, I live in Northern Virginia. So, but yeah, Washington D.C. is the hub for that NGO space. I think New York comes next second. I think.
Fantastic, fantastic. So honey, just to dive a little bit deeper, if that's all right, for refugee of Palestine here. Re- what's really going on? What's the issue here? Are they moving over to the US, and then are they just really having some struggles trying to adapt? And I'm Asian American Vietnamese. My parents came from Vietnam, so growing up, we kind of had those face of like adversity and challenges too. I'm curious to pick your brain from the frontline thoughts. What kind of challenges are they facing today, especially with this Gen Z social media and trends and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the struggles of the Vietnamese Americans. They've gone through so many things, and you could relate to a lot of those issues as your family. And I'm sure you know families who struggle, people whose life were lost, or people who couldn't be together because of wars and conflict. So UNRWA works actually with refugees in the Middle East. We don't really help with refugee resettlement, so we don't bring anyone here. Our focus is to make sure basic services, like if a kid is in a refugee camp, they get to go to school, they get the vaccine from measles or chickenpox. Nobody's against those things. I mean, I just described the conflict through my grandfather. So in 1948, my grandfather was forced from his home, which is literally 20 minutes away from where we Gaza Strip. So they thought somebody's coming in to kill them. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of violence. So in order for them to save their lives, they drove or walked for half a day to get to Gaza Strip, where they felt they would be safe. He left a chicken on the stove cooking, thinking he's going to go back the next day. And 2 years ago, we just buried my grandfather at the age of 99 years old. He never came back. He never was allowed to go back. So UNRWA focuses on those populations. About official number is 5.6 million Palestine refugees. So we try to provide services for those who need it the most. Now, those folks had homes, those folks had dreams, they had the land property that they ran away from because they wanted to survive. And until this day, so UNRWA's role is to make sure we provide services for refugees until a just solution to their problem exists. And obviously, we're not any time closer to having a right of return for refugees, or so they remain stuck in an area where like we're not going back, but things are really tough for us here. And UNRWA tries to make it a little bit less harsh with food assistance and stuff, but the reality is it is not just a humanitarian crisis.
Wow. Okay. So sorry to hear that. So your grandpa, rest in peace to that gentleman, by the way, 99 years old, walked out like a day and a half with a chicken cooking his stove and never came back.
Correct. And
Damn. Okay.
Yeah. And frankly, in a clear day, you could see where it came from. If you go in a high roof building in Gaza, you could see the land where he was raised.
Yeah.
That property, but we can never go back. And it just sucks because, you're like, but on the other hand, people who spend time in Europe or Russia, they say, hey, come on in, you belong, you belong. But the people who are actually indigenous to the land are not allowed to go even visit or even be with family if they have any family behind the green line.
Yeah, no, kudos to them, and we're sorry to hear that. Honey, so let's just quick pivot real quick to get a better understanding here. And I truly believe that's your why, kind of why you're doing what you do. Your grandfather left you a prime example. So you mentioned uh COVID, and then the 2020, and then the pandemic. Everyone had to make a digital shift. When it comes to raising awareness for the Palestinians, prior to the pandemic, what were you guys currently doing to help spread the word, increasing awareness, and ultimately gather donations?
So I'll give you even a bigger point. In 2008, the previous US administration defunded the UN agency that works with Palestine refugees. So every year, the US government used to give that agency about 350 million, 380 million a year. The previous administration made that zero, right? So
Oh man.
imagine you're the biggest donor and all of a sudden you become zero donor. So that caused a lot of problems. Again, people were facing pandemic and all that in 2020. So how do you manage a healthcare system? How do you manage schools remotely? Luckily, the current administration restored a large chunk of that fund, so the organization is able to operate smoothly. But some of the states, because of the issue in Ukraine, they're saying, "Oh, this is more urgent. We're gonna allocate funds there, and not gonna give to the Palestine refugees." And there's a lot of so that allowed us. There was a military campaign on Gaza in May 2021. So, no, May 2021, there was a campaign, and a lot of people lost their lives. So we have to provide more assistance and cash assistance and home rebuilding. Now, Jackson, as you know, they say in the news, is like if it bleeds, right? So if the bombs are falling, then people are paying attention and they're sending support. But the bulk of the work happens after the conflict. People don't have a home anymore. And remember, they were refugees to begin with. Now they're refugees for the second, the third, the fourth time because their homes get destroyed. So the agency, we raise funds for provide rent assistance for people. So give them a voucher to pay for rent for 6 months until they figure out their next move. In some cases, they help them rebuild if the funds are around. But because of the lack of funding and the defunding campaign for the organization, we have a lot of little resources, which creates problems with, you can't hire good staff, you can't retain good staff, and that causes a lot of problems for them. And we try to spread awareness, advocate for the cause, and also solicit donations online, offline. And, right now we're doing a big digital campaign for the month of Ramadan, and it's going really well. But again, you're talking about millions of dollars needed to make an impact, and we may raise 6 million, right?
Oh
But
wow.
still a lot
Okay.
of work, and we're a small team, so that's our hope that Americans would really show the Palestine refugees that Americans care because they do. Sometimes you've seen the issue with Ukraine. All of a sudden, everybody wants to go and do work, which is great. The Ukrainians are suffering, but sadly, it seems only the European suffering counts. There's suffering in Syria, suffering in Yemen, and that's just hurtful because you feel somehow your life, and you've seen some racism in some of the ways some of those token heads talk about blue-eyed refugees, they're Christians, they like us. Imagine what they've said with the Vietnamese American
Oh
here.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Honey, thank you for sharing that. And kudos to what you guys are doing. I understand where you're coming from. Just even if it's just 3 months, maybe even 1 month rather than 6 in terms of assistance. Sometimes that's all you really need because they're in the process right now and they got hurt. And they're trying to get back and then they get hurt again. But they're out there, they're really, really trying. And what that means is even that 1 month can make a big difference because they bounce back, and then that's all they never needed. um Quick question before, I know we're almost running out of time here, honey, so I'm just curious, two questions for you before we go, if that's all right. When it comes to technology and fundraising, how has technology helped nonprofits such as yours um run campaigns and get awareness out, and what are a few things other can do to help increase the peer-to-peer fundraising, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, scale, really scale. Technology allowed us to be in more places than one, meaning we do virtual event that's global. All of a sudden, we have people from California watching, as people from Idaho, people from Montana, people from New York watching at the same time. So you could have an event for literally unlimited amount of people watching, versus you have to be in person and then pray that you will have 1,000 people and so technology allowed you to have a bigger platform, and that actually allowed us to expand our fundraising. That's one. Now, in the past, you do a letter in the mail, you could only afford to send to 20,000 people. But now, thanks to technology, that you could send a message to 1,000 people for about $20, right? So this is when you do these annoying video messages that people see. So there's a lot of uses for that, where people get to know about a charity, meaning you don't have to be local anymore. You could be a small charity in Houston, Texas, and have a message somebody in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and if they care about your cause, they will support it. So that's the beauty of technology. Now, peer-to-peer is really important for us because that's how we are able to secure some of those funding from these big events. Because when we do a Gaza 5K, we want people to sign up for the event. Frankly, not many platforms in the online donation can process that. There's maybe one or two or three even among hundreds of platforms that solicit donations that figure out the peer-to-peer platform. And we have one of those tools that works, but ultimately the technology changes by the minute. And if it's not easy for people to use, they're not going to use it, right? And you do a big event, do a big event, and for 1,000 people, say if only 100 people of those raise money for you, that's great. We're grateful for them, but you really want to try to get to 500 raising money for you, because people give to people, right? So Jackson, friend, if you say, hey, I'm running for these guys, then all of a sudden your friends will see that, hey, I will support this cause. They may not be a donor for the organization. They're donors for Jackson. So now the burden on us to try to win them over.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So that's the struggle.
Yeah.
Event donors were given because Jackson ran the Gaza 5K. But unless the organization has a welcome series or a way to onboard these donors, because they may not know or may frankly not care that much. They're supported because you ran the 5K, right? Now, thankfully, they gave a donation. Now, how do you work with them to make them really donors for the organization?
Okay. Thank you for that. So technology moves fast. It's constantly moving. To beat it, we have to be even faster. But to the best practice to do peer-to-peer is not just, hey, honey, this is what we're doing. This is to my buddies for peer-to-peer. But it also has to be something that's easy to use, that to navigate, because that can also act as like a roadblock, right? Where it just, you come in and then just that. And it just, okay. Honey, before we go here, I just want to first again say thank you again so much for coming on SDR-TV podcast TV channel to share your story and your why. We truly appreciate this. Just before we go, one last question, if that's okay, just for kicks, I gotta do this to share for this millennial twist. You as a director of Philanthropist, I'm sure a lot of people emails you, call you every day and stuff. I'm curious to just for the podcast. How was your experience when I sent you an email with a GIF and I just called you off the bat? I was wondering, how was your experience with that there?
That's the coffee one?
Yeah. How I just sent you an email and then I called
Honestly,
you.
I was impressed. I want to copy this, Jeff. I'm serious. Here's what. We have our donors. We asked them, hey, can you have coffee with me to just chat about your support? Thank you in person. And that, Jeff, just makes you like a real person. Like, wow, this is good. Like, I see it. It's not just the same old boring things. Now, I really loved it, and I thought it was pretty cool. So, bravo.
Honey, thank you so much for coming on. Truly appreciate you. And we'll see you, we can see posted on your episode.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Steve.